I have sat on this bench for a long time. I have seen liars who smile too much. I have seen guilty people who cry on cue. I have seen families tear each other apart over money, over land, over nothing at all. I thought I had seen everything. I was wrong. The moment her hand connected with his face, I stopped breathing for exactly 1 second. Not because I was shocked in the way audiences want judges to be shocked. I have been surprised before. I stopped breathing because of what I saw after the slap. The father did not yell. He did not fight back. He did not flinch the way a man flinches from pain. He flinched the way a man flinches when something confirms what he already feared. His name was Harold Myers, 72 years old, retired contractor, the kind of man who built things with his hands and measured his life in what he left behind. He had walked into my courtroom that morning with a red folder, a pressed shirt, and the quiet dignity of someone who has been deeply wronged but refuses to become bitter about it. His daughter's name was Sandra, 41 years old. She walked in like she owned the room. Expensive shoes, crossed arms, the kind of surface confidence that looks completely real until it gets tested. It took about 30 seconds for the testing to begin. The bailiff moved instantly. The gallery gasped. I did not move at all. I let the silence stretch. 5 full seconds. I wanted every single person in that room to sit inside what had just happened, to feel the full weight of it before anyone said another word. Then I spoke. Sit down. 2 words, no gavel, no raised voice. Just authority so absolute that the woman who had walked into this room like she owned it slowly lowered herself back into her chair. I looked at Harold. His cheek was red. His hands were folded in his lap, not in anger, but in that tired, defeated posture of a man who has absorbed too many blows over too many years. He was staring at the table, not at her the way people look away when they do not want anyone to see that they are close to breaking. And I thought, this is not the first time she has done this to him. I was about to find out exactly how right I was. But what I did not know yet, what nobody in that courtroom knew yet, was that the slap was the smallest thing Sandra Myers had done to her father. The real crime was sitting inside a folder on my desk, and it was about to detonate everything. I gave Harold the floor first. He spoke slowly, carefully, like a man who had rehearsed this moment 100 times alone in his kitchen at night and was still not completely sure the words would come out right. He told me about the house. He had built it himself, not as a metaphor, but literally. 30 years ago, he bought a piece of land on the edge of the city when nobody believed land there was worth a single dollar. He poured the foundation with 2 other men. He laid the floors himself. He painted every wall. He finished the roof on a Sunday in July, alone, because he had run out of money to pay anyone else. He raised Sandra in that house. He brought his wife home to that house after her hospital stay. After she passed 6 years ago, he had lived there alone, just him, the walls he built, and the memories inside them. Then one evening, Sandra came to visit. She brought papers. She told him it was a formality, just updating some legal documents in case anything happened to him. She said a lawyer friend had prepared everything carefully. She sat across from him at the kitchen table. She smiled, and she said, "Dad, just sign here. It is nothing. I am protecting you." He signed. He did not know he had just signed a full property transfer document. He had handed ownership of his home, the house he built, the house where he raised his daughter, the house where his wife took her last breath entirely over to Sandra. He found out 3 months later when a notice arrived about a property tax reassessment. His name was no longer on the deed. I listened to every word. I did not look at Sandra while Harold spoke. I watched him. And what I saw was a man describing something that had broken something deep inside him. Not the money, not the property value, but the simple, devastating fact that it was his own daughter who had done it. When he finished, I turned to Sandra. She was already leaning forward, already prepared. "He gave it to me willingly," she said. He said he wanted me to have it. He said it out loud. "I have a witness." I looked at her for a long moment. "You have a witness?" I said. "Yes." "And this witness, were they present in the room when your father signed the documents?" A small pause, too small. "They were nearby." I wrote something down. I said nothing yet. But I already knew the witness Sandra was so confident about was already in that courtroom. And what they were about to say was nothing, nothing at all like what Sandra had been counting on. Unexpected twist, the best friend speaks. The bailiff brought her in. Her name was Carla, mid-40s. Sandra's former co-worker and, according to Sandra, her closest friend for 12 years. She had been sitting in the gallery the entire time. When I called her forward, Sandra turned to look at her with a particular expression of someone who expects backup. Carla did not look back at her. That alone told me everything I needed to know before she said a single word. I asked her to state her name, her relationship to both parties, and what she had witnessed on the evening the documents were signed. She folded her hands in her lap. She took one breath. And then she said, I was there. And Harold did not sign those papers voluntarily. The gallery erupted. I raised one hand and the room went quiet. Sandra's chair scraped backward. Carla, what are you? Sit down, Ms. Myers, I said. You will have a chance to respond. Right now, I am listening to this witness. Carla kept her eyes on me the entire time. She told me that Sandra had given Harold a glass of wine before bringing out the papers, that she had described them as a trust document, not a property transfer, that when Harold squinted at the pages and asked what exactly he was signing, Sandra had laughed lightly and said, Dad, it is just boring legal language. You know, I would never do anything bad. He had laughed too and signed. Carla said she had not spoken up sooner because Sandra had told her she would handle it, that it was a temporary arrangement, that she was going to tell her father the full truth when the time was right. She never did. Carla looked at Sandra for the first time since taking the stand. I am sorry, she said quietly, but I cannot keep lying for you. Sandra's face did something I have seen before, not anger, not sadness, but the particular slow collapse of someone whose entire version of events has just been dismantled in public. I let the silence sit. Then I looked at Harold. He was staring at the table again, but something was different in his posture now. Something small but unmistakable. His shoulders had dropped not in defeat, in relief. Someone had finally told the truth. I turned to Sandra. Do you still want to claim, I said slowly, that your father signed those documents knowingly and willingly? She opened her mouth, then she closed it. Then she said the 4 words that sealed her fate in my courtroom. He should have read it. I have heard many excuses across this bench, but blaming a 72-year-old man for trusting his own daughter, that one stayed with me. And I was not finished, because what the financial records were about to reveal made the property transfer look like only the beginning. Another twist, $31,000. By the time I called for the financial records, Sandra had gone very quiet. Not the quiet of someone accepting defeat, the quiet of someone calculating, trying to figure out how much I already knew and how much was still buried. The bailiff placed the documents on my bench. I flipped the first page, then the second. Then I set my pen down and looked up at Sandra. Miss Myers, I said, would you like to explain these withdrawals? What withdrawals? She said. I turned the page toward the camera. 3 years of bank statements from Harold's account. Regular transfers, 400 here, 700 there, 1,200 one winter month. All going to the same destination account. All initiated from Harold's phone, which Sandra had full access to because she had volunteered very kindly to help her father manage his finances after his wife passed. Total across 3 years, $31,000. Harold's jaw tightened. He had not known about all of it. I could see him calculating in real-time months where his savings were shorter than they should have been, expenses he could not explain, moments where he had quietly wondered if he was losing his mind. He was not losing his mind. He was being robbed by someone he loved. Those were for household expenses, Sandra said quickly. He asked me to manage things. I was helping him. Helping him, I repeated, for 3 years. Without receipts, without documentation, without ever telling him the running total. She shifted in her seat. He knew. He always knew. I looked at Harold. He shook his head slowly. She told me she was paying the utility bills. She said the amounts were small. I turned back to Sandra. Her lawyer leaned over to whisper something. She pushed his hand away. That was the moment I understood. She had not been fully honest, even with her own attorney. I set the records down and folded my hands. Miss Myers, I want to be very clear about what I am looking at, I said. This is not a daughter helping her aging father manage his finances. This is a pattern of unauthorized financial transfers from a widower's account over 36 months, combined with a fraudulent property transfer obtained through deliberate deception. This is not a family dispute. This is elder financial abuse. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. The galler went completely still. Sandra's face went white. Harold closed his eyes. Before we continue, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching this from and what time is it there? We read every single one. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. The judgment in this case is coming, and it is one you absolutely do not want to miss. The letter from the mother. I have learned over many years on this bench that people rarely do terrible things for the reasons they claim. Sandra had told herself a story. She had told it so many times, so convincingly, that she had started to believe it was simply the truth. I asked her one question. Why? Not why did you take the money? Not why did you forge the documents? Just why? She looked at me for a long moment. Then something shifted. The calculation left her face. The performance fell away completely. And what was underneath it was something I recognized immediately. Grief. She left everything to him, Sandra said. Her voice was different now, quieter, raw, stripped down. When my mother died, she left everything to Dad. The house, the savings, everything. She did not leave me a single thing. I was her daughter. I took care of her for 3 years, straight. I drove her to every single appointment. I sat with her every night at the end when she could not sleep. She stopped. Her hands were shaking slightly. And when she was gone, it was like I did not exist. Dad got everything. I got a handwritten note that said she was proud of me. The courtroom was very quiet. I looked at Harold. He had not moved. His eyes were wet. She was proud of you, he said softly. We both were, every single day. Then why did she leave me nothing? The silence that followed had weight. Harold looked down at his folder. He opened it slowly. He pulled out a single piece of paper and slid it across the table to the bailiff, who carried it to me. It was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks before his wife passed. I read it in full silence. Then I read a portion of it aloud. Sandra will always try to carry everything herself. She takes and takes until there's nothing left, not because she's selfish, but because she's afraid. Please protect her from herself. Do not let her have more than she can carry. The house needs to stay with you, Harold. Keep it safe until she is ready. The courtroom was silent for a very long time. Sandra's mother had known. She had watched her daughter her whole life and seen exactly what would happen, and she had tried gently, quietly, with love, to protect both of them. Sandra was staring at the letter from across the room. Her face held an expression I have no precise name for. Your mother did not leave you nothing, I said quietly. She left you a father, and you spent 3 years trying to take him away from himself. That broke her. Not dramatically, not loudly. She put her face in her hands and her shoulders shook. The sound she made was not performance. It was the sound of someone who has just understood something terrible and true about themselves for the very first time. I let her sit in that for 30 seconds. Then I picked up my pen. What I was about to rule would surprise everyone in that room, including Harold Myers. Because justice in my courtroom is never only about punishment. Sometimes it is about something much harder than that. The judgment that closed everything. I have given rulings that made people cheer. I have given rulings that made people furious. I have given rulings that made grown men cry. This one was different from all of them. I looked at Sandra first. Ms. Myers, I want you to hear every word of what I'm about to say, not only as a legal ruling, but as one human being speaking plainly to another who has made some very serious mistakes. She raised her head. Her eyes were red and steady. She was listening. You removed $31,000 from your father's account over 3 years without his knowledge or consent. You obtained a property transfer document through deliberate deception, misrepresenting to a 72-year-old man exactly what he was signing. You used your position as his most trusted person, the person he loved most after your mother died, to systematically strip him of his financial security and the home he built with his own hands. And when he came to this courtroom to simply reclaim what is rightfully his, you struck him in front of me. in front of this gallery, on camera. I paused and let every word settle. That is fraud. That is elder financial abuse. And that assault committed in front of a judge in a court of law is contempt. I picked up my pen. I am ruling in full favor of the plaintiff, Harold Myers, without exception or condition. The property transfer is null and void, effective immediately. The deed will be returned to Mr. Myers today. You will repay the full $31,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. You are fined $12,000 for contempt of court for the assault committed on these premises. And I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal charges of elder financial abuse and document fraud. I am recommending to the criminal court a custodial sentence of 3 years. That determination rests with them, but I am putting my recommendation in writing. And it will be clear. Sandra's attorney put his head down. Sandra did not move. I set my pen down and looked at the bailiff. Bring the property documents forward. The bailiff placed the papers on my bench. I signed where required. I stamped what needed stamping. And then, because this man had walked into my courtroom with the full dignity of someone who had been deeply wronged and never once lost himself in it, I did not hand the documents to a clerk. I did not slide them across a table. I stood up. I walked them over myself. I stood in front of Harold Myers, 72 years old, retired contractor, a man who built his home with his own hands and spent 3 years watching his daughter quietly take it apart, and I placed the folder directly into his hands. This is yours, I said. It was always yours. I am sorry it took a courtroom to give it back to you. His hands trembled slightly as he took it, not from weakness, from the particular relief of a man who spent months being told he was confused about his own life. Thank you, he whispered. I nodded once, the kind of nod that carries everything words cannot. I returned to my bench. I looked at Sandra one final time. She was no longer sitting with crossed arms. She was no longer burning with that performative defiance. She was sitting very still, very small, staring at her father with an expression that was, for the first time all morning, completely unguarded. I had one more thing to say. Miss Myers, your mother said she was proud of you. Despite everything that happened in this courtroom today, I believe she still would be. Not because of what you did, but because of what you are still capable of becoming. Your mother saw that in you. She wrote it down. That is the only inheritance that actually matters. I hope, when you have had enough time to think clearly, you find your way back to it. The gallery was absolutely silent. Sandra said nothing, but she nodded once, very small, to herself. I raised my gavel. This case is closed. The crack echoed off every wall. Harold stood slowly, folder pressed to his chest. He did not look at Sandra again. He walked to the door with the same quiet dignity he had carried through the entire morning, except now something had changed in it. His spine was straight. His steps were sure. He was going home. Arrogance collapses the moment truth walks into the room. Today, truth walked in, and it brought justice with it.